What happens when the very people sworn to protect you cast you out to die in the freezing winter? For Vivienne of the Cresthaven Pack, being branded a runt was a death sentence. But destiny has a wicked sense of humor, especially when the terrifying Alpha King comes collecting. According to the fragmented, ink-stained journals of Lady Beatrice Harrington, a 15th century scholar who famously and dangerously documented the hidden werewolf societies of Northern Europe, the Cresthaven Pack was notorious for its ruthlessness. Nestled in the jagged, unforgiving peaks of the Frostborn Mountains, they valued brutal strength and combat prowess above all else. To be born weak in Cresthaven was not just an unfortunate trait, it was an active curse upon the bloodline. This was the harsh reality for Vivienne. At 20 years old, she was a stark contrast to the towering, muscle-bound wolves of her pack. She was small, fragile-looking, and worst of all, her inner wolf had never awakened. By all historical lichen accounts, she was a late bloomer, but in the unforgiving eyes of pack law, she was nothing more than a useless runt. Her father, Rowan, had been a revered warrior who died a gruesome death defending their northern borders against a coven of rogue vampires. His ultimate sacrifice had brought Vivienne a few years of grace and pity, but as the harsh winter of 1442 set in, that grace had officially expired. The night of the winter solstice was supposed to be a night of grand celebration. The pack's great hall was suffocatingly hot, filled with the thick scent of roasted boar, cheap ale, pine needles, and the overwhelming primal pheromones of unmated wolves looking to claim a partner. Vivienne sat huddled in the darkest, furthest corner of the hall, her threadbare woolen cloak pulled tightly around her narrow shoulders. She wanted nothing more than to survive the night unnoticed, to slip back to her meager quarters and continue her quiet life of foraging and mending clothes. But Alpha Dominic had entirely different plans. Dominic was a cruel, vain leader who ruled his territory through fear, public humiliation, and an iron fist. He stood at the head of the long, heavily scarred wooden table, his piercing amber eyes scanning the crowded room until they locked onto Vivienne. The raucous laughter in the hall fell eerily silent as he raised a heavy iron-wrought goblet, signaling for the room's attention. "Tonight we celebrate the enduring strength of our bloodline." Dominic's voice boomed, rattling the ancient rusted shields hung on the stone walls. But a chain is only as strong as its weakest link, and for far too long, the noble Cresthaven Pack has carried dead weight under the guise of charity. Vivienne's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Her breath hitched. She knew exactly what was coming. Dominic pointed a scarred, accusing finger directly at the shadows where she hid. Bring the runt forward. Two massive enforcers, men she had known since childhood, grabbed Vivienne by her upper arms, violently dragging her to the center of the hall. She didn't fight them. She knew struggling would only invite a public beating. The eyes of her packmates, people her father had bled and died for, were filled with either cold pity or outright disgust. Not a single soul stepped forward to defend her. "Vivienne," Dominic sneered, stepping down from the elevated dais to circle her like a predator playing with a wounded rabbit. 20 winters have passed and you cannot even summon a tail or a claw to defend yourself. You consume our hard-earned rations. You take up space in our dens, and you offer absolutely nothing in return to the pack." "Oh, Alpha, please," Vivienne whispered, her voice trembling slightly, though she stubbornly kept her chin held high. "I gather medicinal herbs, I tend to the sick pups. I am useful to the healers." Dominic laughed, a harsh, barking sound that was quickly echoed by his loyal sycophants. "We are wolves, girl, not human apothecaries. We need fierce warriors. We need breeders to give us strong, capable pups. You are neither. By the ancient, unyielding laws of Cresthaven, I officially strip you of your rank. I strip you of your pack name and your protection. You are hereby banished to the Whispering Woods. If you are found within our borders by sunrise, you will be hunted down and killed like a common stray. A collective gasp rippled through the smoky room, though no one dared to utter a word of objection. The Whispering Woods in the dead of winter was a frozen, cursed wasteland crawling with rogue beasts, shadow creatures, and deadly predators. It was an execution cleanly disguised as an exile. The enforcers dragged her to the heavy oak doors of the great hall and roughly shoved her out into the blinding, freezing snowstorm. As the heavy doors slammed shut behind her with a sickening thud, cutting off the warmth and the light of the fires, Vivian was left alone in the biting, violent wind. The magical mark of Cresthaven on her left shoulder burned fiercely for a terrifying, agonizing second before fading away completely, leaving her skin bare. She was now utterly, terrifyingly alone, a rogue, a dead woman walking into the ice. Vivian stumbled blindly through the knee-deep snow, her breath pluming in the icy air like dragon smoke. The Whispering Woods had earned their ominous name from the eerie, unsettling way the wind howled through the skeletal branches of the ancient, towering pines, sounding exactly like human voices calling out from the dark. Frost clung heavily to her eyelashes, and her limbs grew heavier and more unresponsive with every agonizing step. She knew the medical stages of freezing to death. Soon the violent shivering would stop. Soon her brain would trick her into feeling warm, and she would simply lay down to sleep forever. She just needed to keep moving her feet, but destiny was already rewriting her tragedy into something far more complicated and far more dangerous. Less than 48 hours after Vivian's cruel banishment, the fortified gates of Cresthaven were violently, explosively breached. The pack's sentries didn't even have time to sound the warning bells before they were physically thrown through the air, their bodies crashing into the snow-covered courtyard in heaps of groaning limbs. The Alpha King had arrived. King Alaric of the Ironclad territory was a living, breathing legend, a terrifying monarch whose royal bloodline traced back to the very first Lycans to ever walk the earth. He was a behemoth of a man, standing well over 6.5 feet tall, radiating an aura of absolute, suffocating power so dense it physically forced weaker wolves to their knees simply by stepping into his proximity. His eyes were a piercing, unnatural shade of liquid silver, and his handsome, battle-scarred face was carved from unforgiving granite. He traveled with a small elite royal guard draped in black furs, but looking at the broadsword strapped to his back, it was abundantly clear he needed no protection. Dominic rushed out of the great hall, his usual arrogant swagger faltering instantly the moment he felt the crushing predatory weight of Alaric's presence. The local alpha dropped to one knee in the snow, baring his neck in a desperate show of submission. "My king, to what do we owe the incredible honor of your unannounced visit? Had we known of your arrival, we would have prepared a feast worthy of your silence." Alaric's voice was barely above a low whisper, yet it echoed across the courtyard with a terrifying, resonant command that made the snow seemingly stop falling. According to the historical accounts of the region, the Alpha King rarely, if ever, left his impenetrable mountain fortress unless it was to wage a bloody war. But Alaric had come to this remote, miserable village for a very different reason. For weeks, his royal seers had been violently plagued by fever dreams and visions of a silver moon bleeding over the frostborn mountains. The seers claimed that the king's fated Mater Queen, prophesied to unite the fractured northern territories, was currently hiding within the walls of Cresthaven. "I have come for my annual tithe," Alaric stated coldly, his piercing silver eyes sweeping over the trembling pack members who had gathered nervously in the courtyard. "And I have come to claim a bride from your ranks to be my queen." Dominic's eyes widened with sudden, overwhelming greed. An alliance with the Alpha King would make Cresthaven untouchable across the continent. He immediately signaled for his younger sister, Cassandra, a tall, fiercely beautiful and lethal warrior, to step forward from the crowd. "My king, we are beyond honored," Allow me to present Cassandra, our strongest, most capable female. She would make a formidable. Alaric didn't even look at her. Instead, his head snapped violently to the side, his dark hair whipping across his face. His nostrils flared, taking in the deep scents of the courtyard. A sudden, violent tremor ran through his massive, armored frame. The scent was remarkably faint, almost entirely masked by the heavy snow and the pathetic stench of Dominic's fear. But to Alaric's heightened senses, it was like a beacon of roaring fire in the dark. It smelled intoxicatingly of crushed winter roses, petrichor, and sweet vanilla. "Who?" Alaric growled, his voice dropping a terrifying octave, physically shaking the loose snow from the wooden rooftops. "Was standing right there?" He pointed a heavily ringed, leather-clad finger at the exact spot in the snow where Vivian had been stripped of her pack mark 2 nights prior. Dominic swallowed hard, suddenly sweating profusely despite the freezing temperature. "No one of consequence, my king. Just a weakling. A useless runt. We purged her from the pack to keep our warrior bloodline pure and strong." The air pressure in the courtyard seemed to instantly vanish. Several weaker wolves collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath, as Alaric's raw killing intent flooded the open space. The king moved faster than the human eye could track. 1 second he was standing 10 feet away, and the next he had Dominic lifted completely off the ground by his throat, his massive hand casually crushing the local alpha's windpipe. "You banished her." Alaric's voice was a demonic, guttural rumble that vibrated through the frozen earth beneath their feet. His silver eyes bled into a terrifying, glowing crimson, the absolute biological sign of a dominant alpha whose fated mate had been threatened. "You threw my queen into the snow?" Dominic clawed uselessly at Alaric's steel-plated arm, his face rapidly turning a mottled, suffocating purple. She was wolfless," he choked out, spitting blood onto the king's gauntlet. Alaric threw Dominic to the frozen ground with bone-shattering force, indifferent to the sickening crack of the alpha's ribs. "If she is dead," the king roared, drawing his massive broadsword with a metallic screech that made the pack whimper, "I will slaughter every man, woman, and child in this wretched camp. Trackers, find her scent now." Meanwhile, deep within the unforgiving heart of the Whispering Woods, Vivienne had finally collapsed. The brutal cold had fully seeped into her bones, and the promised treacherous warmth of late-stage hypothermia had begun to wrap her in a deadly, comforting embrace. She curled into a small, fragile ball at the base of a massive, hollowed-out oak tree, entirely out of tears to cry. She closed her heavy eyes, ready to surrender to the endless, peaceful sleep. But as her consciousness began to slowly fade away, a strange, impossible sensation washed over her. It wasn't a biting cold. It was a heated, deep, ancient, burning heat that originated from the very center of her chest. For the first time in her 20 years of miserable life, a voice echoed clearly in her mind. A deep, powerful, feminine growl that vibrated against her skull. "Hold on, little one. He comes." Before Vivienne could even attempt to process the voice of the dormant wolf she thought she never had, the loud sound of thundering footsteps physically shook the ground beneath her. The frozen brush was violently torn open, and standing amidst the swirling snow was a towering figure wrapped in dark furs and black steel. King Alaric dropped to his knees in the snow beside her, his terrifying, lethal aura instantly softening into frantic, heartbroken desperation. He pulled her freezing, fragile body against his massive chest, immediately wrapping his heavy, magically warmed fur cloak completely around her. Vivienne forced her frost-crusted eyes open, weakly meeting his panicked, crimson-rimmed silver gaze. "I've got you," Alaric whispered hoarsely, burying his face in her icy, snow-filled hair, desperately inhaling her fading scent. "I've got you, my queen. You're safe now." Vivienne desperately wanted to ask who this giant was, but her physical exhaustion was absolute. She let her heavy head fall against his warm armor, her world finally going black, completely unaware that the dangerous man holding her was about to set the entire werewolf world on fire, just to avenge her. According to the meticulously translated 1894 transcripts of Professor Alistair Covington, a renowned British historian who dedicated his life to uncovering the hidden, socio-political structures of European lycanthropy, a wolf's manifestation is heavily dependent on their environment. Covington's Nordic lichen lexicon explicitly states that certain ancient, dormant bloodlines possess a survival mechanism so advanced, the inner beast will actively refuse to awaken if the surrounding alpha is deemed unworthy, weak, or toxic. Vivienne was not a runt. She had never been a runt. She was a biological anomaly, an apex predator locked inside a cage of self-preservation, desperately waiting for a king strong enough to hold her leash. When Vivienne finally opened her eyes, the biting, murderous cold of the whispering woods was gone. She was enveloped in an almost suffocating cocoon of heat, surrounded by the scent of cedar, burning embers, and that intoxicating, aggressive aroma of petrichor and vanilla. She was lying in a massive four-poster bed draped in heavy velvet and imported silks. The stone walls of the cavernous bedchamber were adorned with magnificent tapestries depicting ancient wolf battles, and a massive hearth roared with a life-giving fire. "You have slept for 4 days," a deep, gravelly voice broke the silence. Vivienne flinched, instinctively pulling the heavy fur blankets up to her chin. Sitting in a high-backed leather chair beside the fire was King Alaric. Without his heavy, terrifying battle armor, he looked less like a walking nightmare and more like a devastatingly handsome, fiercely exhausted man. He wore a simple, unlaced linen tunic and dark trousers, his dark hair messy and unkempt. Shadows of severe sleep deprivation bruised the skin beneath his silver eyes. He hadn't left her side for a single second. "Where am I?" Vivienne croaked, her throat dry and raspy. "You are inside the iron-clad keep," Alaric replied, standing slowly so as not to frighten her. He moved to a silver basin, poured a goblet of fresh water, and brought it to her. His massive, calloused hands were impossibly gentle as he supported the back of her neck, helping her drink. "You are in my home. Your home." Bah. Vivienne swallowed the water, her mind racing to comprehend the sheer impossibility of the situation. "Why? Why did you save me?" "Dominic, my pack. They cast me out. I am nothing. I have no wolf. I am broken." Alaric's jaw clenched, a dangerous primal rumble vibrating in his chest at the mention of the alpha who had hurt her. He set the goblet down and knelt beside the bed, bringing his face level with hers. "You are not broken, Vivienne. You are my fated mate. The moon goddess herself could not have crafted a more perfect queen for my territory. But I can't shift," she protested, tears of profound insecurity welling in her eyes. "A king needs a powerful queen, someone who can fight, who can command the respect of the royal court. I am just a human girl wrapped in a werewolf's tragedy." "Let me worry about the court," Alaric said softly, gently wiping a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The moment his skin touched hers, a violent electrical spark arched between them. Vivienne gasped. That strange ancient heat she had felt in the freezing woods suddenly flared back to life in the center of her chest. It wasn't just heat, it was a heartbeat. A second massive heartbeat thumping in rhythm with her own. "Let them challenge us," the deep feminine voice growled in her mind, sounding much stronger, much closer this time. "We will tear their throats out." Vivienne's eyes widened in absolute shock. Alaric noticed the sudden shift in her breathing. His silver eyes darkened with predatory recognition. He leaned in, his lips brushing against the shell of her ear. "She is waking up, my beautiful queen. Your wolf has simply been waiting for a territory safe enough to claim. She was waiting for me, But the transition into royalty was far from a peaceful fairy tale. The ironclad territory was vast, housing dozens of allied packs and high-born noble families who had spent decades grooming their own daughters for the throne. When news spread that the terrifying Alpha King had brought home an unshifted banished exile from a minor border pack, the royal court erupted in thinly veiled outrage. The primary instigator of this rebellion was Lady Genevieve of the Blood Moon clan, a striking, ruthless she-wolf who had long believed the crown was her birthright. 2 weeks after Vivienne's arrival, a grand banquet was held to formally introduce the new queen to the ruling council. Vivienne, dressed in a breathtaking gown of midnight blue silk, sat rigidly beside Alaric at the head table. She felt the heavy, judging stares of 100 seasoned warriors burning into her skin. Genevieve stood up from her seat, raising a goblet in a mock toast. "To our great king," she purred, her voice dripping with venomous condescension, "and to his charity case. It is truly a testament to your immense mercy, my king, that you would dilute the ancient ironclad bloodline with a defective stray. Tell us, little human, do you plan to sow our battle standards, or merely hide under the table when the border wars begin?" The great hall fell into a dead, tense silence. Alaric's grip on his silver goblet tightened until the metal physically groaned and warped under his fingers. He was a fraction of a second away from tearing Genevieve's head from her shoulders for the disrespect. But he didn't have to. Vivienne stood up. She didn't cower. She didn't cry. The blazing heat in her chest suddenly exploded outward, rushing through her veins like liquid fire. When she looked up and met Genevieve's eyes, a collective gasp echoed through the hall. Vivienne's previously soft hazel eyes were entirely gone. In their place was a glowing, ethereal, blinding shade of platinum silver. The heavy oak table shuddered as raw, unfiltered alpha aura poured out of her tiny frame, a presence so heavy and ancient that the torches lining the stone walls flickered and dimmed. "Bow," the inner voice commanded, blending perfectly with Vivienne's spoken words. "I am no stray, Lady Genevieve." Vivienne's voice echoed with a terrifying dual-toned resonance that shook the dust from the rafters. "And if you ever question my place beside my king again, I will not hide under the table. I will bury you beneath it." Genevieve turned deathly pale. Her knees buckled under the sheer, crushing weight of Vivienne's sudden dominant aura, forcing the arrogant noblewoman to collapse to the stone floor in an involuntary, humiliating posture of submission. Alaric looked at his mate, a terrifying, intensely proud smirk spreading across his face. The court had their answer. The queen had arrived. Word of Vivienne's awakening and her newly established dominance spread through the northern territories like wildfire. But pride is a toxic, blinding poison, and no one was more poisoned than Dominic of Cresthaven. Humiliated by Alaric's brutal attack in his own courtyard and desperate to retain his rapidly crumbling authority, Dominic made a fatal miscalculation. He convinced himself that the rumors were a fabricated psychological tactic created by the ironclad king to protect his weak human mate. Fueled by arrogant rage, Dominic rallied 3 rogue packs and a faction of mercenaries, amassing an army of over 400 wolves. Their objective was suicidal but clear: march on the ironclad borders, expose the fake queen, and shatter Alaric's myth of invincibility. The invasion happened on the eve of the blood moon. Alaric's scouts intercepted the march just 3 miles from the keep, in the expansive snow-covered valley known as the Jagged Steppes. Alaric donned his black steel armor, ready to slaughter the fools who dared threaten his peace. "Stay in the keep," he ordered Vivienne, pulling her in for a fierce, desperate kiss. "I will bring you Dominic's head on a spike." "No," Vivienne replied firmly, stepping away from the safety of the heavy iron gates. She was dressed in fitted leather armor, a stark contrast to the fragile girl who had frozen in the woods a month prior. "He is my past. He insulted my bloodline. This is my fight, Alaric. If I am to be their queen, they must see me conquer the monsters of my own nightmares." Alaric studied the burning silver determination in her eyes. He nodded once, filled with dark, dangerous reverence. "Then we ride together." The battlefield was a chaotic symphony of snarling beasts, clashing steel, and fresh blood staining the pristine snow. Dominic stood at the rear of his rebel army, shifting into his massive, battle-scarred brown wolf, roaring orders to his feral mercenaries. When Alaric and Vivienne crested the ridge, flanked by the elite ironclad guard, the fighting momentarily paused. Dominic stepped forward, shifting back to his human form, his face twisted in a sneer of pure hatred. "Look at this," Dominic bellowed across the valley, pointing a bloody sword at Vivienne. "The great King Alaric, hiding behind a runt. Ring her down here, Alaric. Let us see this queen you threw my pack into chaos for." Vivienne didn't look at Alaric for permission. She simply started walking down the snowy embankment toward the center of the battlefield. The mercenaries laughed, seeing this small, seemingly defenseless woman approaching a battle-hardened alpha. "You always were a fool, Dominic," Vivienne called out, her voice eerily calm over the howling wind. "You prized brute strength over lineage. You threw away a diamond because you didn't know how to polish it. I threw away trash." Dominic roared, his bones snapping and cracking as he aggressively shifted back into his monstrous wolf form. He charged at her, a mountain of muscle and fur closing the distance at terrifying speed, his jaws snapping wildly, aiming straight for her throat. Vivienne didn't flinch. She stopped walking. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath of the freezing mountain air, and finally, completely, let the beast out. The transformation wasn't a grotesque breaking of bones like a standard werewolf shift. It was an explosion of pure, blinding magical energy. A shockwave of platinum light blasted outward, physically knocking Dominic mid-leap out of the air and sending him crashing into the snowbanks. When the light faded, the entire valley fell into a deafening, awestruck silence. Standing in Vivienne's place was a creature out of ancient myth, according to historical werewolf lore. The White Seraph was a legendary subspecies thought to be extinct for over 1,000 years. Wolves, directly descended from the moon goddess's original vanguard. Vivienne's wolf was massive, easily rivaling Alaric's terrifying size. Her fur was a shimmering, pure, luminescent white that seemed to glow against the dark winter night, and intricate glowing silver markings painted her muscular flanks. Her eyes were pools of liquid starlight. Dominic scrambled backward in the snow, his wolf whining in absolute soul-crushing terror. This wasn't just an alpha, this was a deity. Vivienne didn't run. She stalked toward him with a chilling, predatory grace. Every step she took radiated a dominance so heavy that the rogue wolves and mercenaries in Dominic's army began to involuntarily drop to their bellies, whimpering and pressing their snouts into the dirt. Dominic tried to stand, tried to fight the biological urge to submit, but he couldn't. The sheer pressure of her aura crushed his will into dust. He collapsed onto his front paws, his massive head bowing until his chin touched the bloody snow at Vivienne's massive paws. The alpha who had banished her for being weak was now groveling like a beaten pup before her. Vivienne placed one massive white paw on the back of Dominic's neck, pinning him to the earth to assert her absolute, unquestionable dominance over him and his surviving followers. She looked up at the ridge, locking her glowing silver eyes with Alaric. The king threw his head back and let out a roaring, earth-shattering howl of victory that echoed through the frostborn mountains, proudly declaring his queen's supremacy to the heavens. Dominic was stripped of his alpha status, his pack disbanded and integrated into the lower ranks of the ironclad forces, destined to spend the rest of their days serving the very runt they had cast out to die. Vivienne ruled the northern territories by Alaric's side, not just as a mate, but as a legend reborn. She transformed the ironclad keep into an unstoppable empire, proving forever that the quietest souls often hide the most terrifying, beautiful monsters. Did Vivienne's epic transformation and revenge give you absolute chills? If you loved this intense werewolf romance and want more thrilling stories of rejected mates, royal alphas, and breathtaking twists, hit that like button right now. Share this video with your pack and subscribe to our channel for weekly dramatic storytelling. Let us know in the comments how you would have punished Dominic. See you in the next tale.